Hello, and welcome to the Improving Facial Expressions tutorial. This is my first tutorial, so yay, I'm excited that I was able to finally make a tutorial for you guys. This tutorial is made possible by you, my lovely patrons, and if you bought this tutorial on Gumroad, thank you to you too. I hope you find it very helpful. A few things I want to go over before we get started. As it says in this first slide, a lot of the techniques I go over in this tutorial are very digital art-based techniques using like digital tools, but there's also a lot of principles in here that can be used no matter what media you are using. So even if you are not really a digital art person, you can still hopefully take away some good principles and ideas from this tutorial. Another thing I wanted to mention was that this tutorial is not really made to be a basic how to draw expressions tutorial. So I will not be going over like step by step how to draw a happy expression or a sad expression or an angry expression. There's a lot of resources out there for that already. But if seeing a more basic tutorial like that sometime in the future is what you guys are interested in, please feel free to let me know via Patreon message or in a comment, and I can add it to the list of potential future things. Alright, so let's start. I just sketched out what I call the boring blank stare. I see this a lot when I'm scrolling through art on social media. There's so many really cute, interesting characters who have a lot of potential, but then they're kind of emotionless and they're just kind of staring blankly and you don't really know what's going on in their heads. Probably nothing because they're not showing it on their faces at all. So we want to fix that. Sometimes a blank stare, a blank expression can be desired depending on the character, but I would say most of the time you want your characters to feel things. So let's learn how to express more emotion. Let's start with elements of the face. There are tons of little muscles in the face that are responsible for expressing emotion, but luckily we don't have to memorize them all. If we did, I would be in trouble because I'm terrible at memorizing stuff. So for simplicity's sake, I'm going to divide a few facial features into two categories. This is just kind of my own way of thinking about how the face works and works together to create expressions. So, first category is primary, second category is secondary. I know, super creative. The primary elements of the face are the parts of the face that move the most and are primarily responsible for expressing emotion. So these parts of the face are like the mouth, super expressive, it's free moving, the lips can make all sorts of shapes, the jaw can open and close, the jaw can also move right to left and forward and backwards. Lots of times we don't think about that, but it can actually make your expressions a lot more interesting to play with that jaw. Teeth are another element that can make the mouth more interesting, and the tongue, because expressions involving the tongue are always fun. Another primary element is the eyebrows. They're just two lines on the face, but they can completely change the expression with a simple angle. It's important to remember that the eyebrows are never exactly symmetrical. They're always a little bit offset, but they're still connected to each other. So you could almost think about the eyebrows like they're one unit at times. Like everybody has a unibrow. Next are the eyes. Interestingly enough, while the eyes do express a lot of emotion, they are not as movable. They're not as free moving as the eyebrows or the mouth. The parts of the eyes that move and express emotion, eyelids, obviously, you want to think of the top eyelid and the bottom eyelid. They both move and they're affected by what's around them. The direction the eyes are looking is important in expressing emotion and intention. and the pupil size, which we won't go over a ton in this tutorial since it's all mostly sketching, but it's interesting that large pupils tend to indicate more positive emotions. They make kind of a doe-eyed sort of look. They can communicate love, pleasure, comfort, and then the small pupils can indicate more negative emotions like dislike, surprise, panic, anger. So in your coloring and shading, this is something interesting and fun to keep in mind. Next, we move on to the secondary elements of the face. So these are the elements of the face that react to the primary elements. I mean, technically, all of the elements are reacting and interacting with each other. It's all part of one unit, which is the face. But this is just how I divide things. So these secondary elements aren't always as free-moving, but they definitely are connected and react to the other elements around them, and they can really help with pushing the facial expression. I think that lots of artists tend not to think about these as much as we should. They can really make a huge difference. So what are some of these secondary elements? Cheeks are an obvious one. They are pushed around by the mouth a lot. They're also can be pushed around by the lower eyelids and the nose if like there's a nose curl or something happening. So even if you're drawing in kind of a cartoony style, it's still good to keep these in mind, even if you don't want to do a ton of shading or wrinkles, because the cheeks also influence other elements around them, like that lower eyelid. So in this example, the mouth is pushing up the cheek, and in turn that cheek is kind of pushing up at that lower eyelid, and it's kind of pushing at the side of the nose as well. Another example is the nose, which is what I just mentioned. Most of us don't have a very free moving nose. It doesn't wander around our faces, but it does react a lot to certain expressions like a sneer or a smile or a smirk, or sometimes the nostrils flare when someone is angry, stuff like that. The next secondary element I listed in the presentation is wrinkles. But wrinkles are really more of just the product of what happens when features squash together. There's squash and stretch that's always happening in the expressions. So these wrinkles can happen all over the face. Obvious locations are when the eyebrows push together and they create wrinkles between the brows, smile lines, stuff like that, lower eye bags. These are all important, even if it's just a tiny indication. It's all good to keep in mind when you're sketching expressions. And then there's also the chin. So the chin doesn't usually move on its own, but it's influenced by the mouth and the jaw. So if your character is opening their mouth, you want to make sure that the chin is also moving with the jaw. Otherwise, the character loses their chin, and that's just awkward. It's always super weird when you see a character, like in anime, I think this happens a lot, where characters talk, but then sometimes their chin doesn't move. It's just kind of strange. So when you draw your characters with an open mouth, make sure you're moving that chin down. Sometimes an easy way to do this, and we'll go over this later in the video, is just using the lasso tool to grab that chin and scoot it down. Another super important principle to remember when drawing an expression or any sort of face is that no face is symmetrical. Even the most beautiful people out there, their face is not going to be exactly symmetrical. Plus, symmetry is pretty boring, so be happy for your asymmetrical faces. So, even a blank expression should not be completely symmetrical. If you notice in this blank expression that I drew at the beginning, she has one eyebrow slightly higher, her lips are not symmetrical, one dip slightly lower, and I encourage you to go and look at yourself in the mirror. Notice how one side of your face is definitely higher than the other. One eye opens wider. This is definitely true for me, And it's probably true for you too. It's just part of being human. So, asymmetry adds interest to your characters and their expressions. Some good examples of how to use asymmetry in expressions is side smiles and smirks. They're a favorite of mine. Eyebrows never exactly the same, nose curling up, some stuff we already mentioned. Even in a sad expression, one eyebrow maybe pushes slightly more than the other. Play with this asymmetry, and it can really help add some interest to your character's expressions. Alright, so this is where we're getting into some more technique kind of stuff, and I want to just briefly touch on tools. So, super basic brush. This is just, it doesn't matter what sort of brush, any brush will do, your favorite brush. Be loose with your drawings when you're experimenting with these expressions. Don't get too tight too soon, or else you can lose the emotion and the movement. You could even try using some larger brush to block in bigger shapes like eyebrows. I almost always in my sketches draw eyebrows as one block shape rather than outlining the eyebrows. I just find it easier to find the expression that way. The eraser. So I use this a ton in all of my sketching, but especially when trying to find or push new expressions. So I like to use the eraser. Once I have my initial expression sketched, I like to use my eraser to carve away at that sketch, to try and push eyebrows different ways, see if different angles look cool, or maybe I just want to make it more dramatic, so I like shave off the bottom of the eyebrow or the top of the eyebrow or the side of the mouth, things like that. Just using the eraser to carve away at your drawing and find something more interesting. The liquify tool is cool because you can use it to just push things a little bit further. You can nudge around features, you can nudge an eyebrow a little bit more, you can nudge the curl of a mouth or a smile more, you can bulge a smile more. But that is another tool that I really enjoy using for pushing expressions. Okay, so now we're going to actually start working on pushing the expression. What I'm doing for this exercise is I am taking the sketch that I did earlier of the kind of boring, just closed mouth smile, and am pushing the expression and changing the expression as I go by using the techniques and principles that we talked about earlier. And this exercise is only changing the facial expression of the character. I'm not even touching the body language of the character, which is a whole nother tutorial that we're not going to get into right now. We're just talking about facial expression. I'm using the eraser to sometimes outright erase the lips, erase things that I don't like or that I want to change, or I'm just using the eraser to carve away. But all the while I'm thinking about asymmetry, making sure things are not boring and symmetrical. I'm thinking about how the primary elements of the face are pushing and interacting with each other and with the secondary elements of the face. How, like in this side smile, the cheek and the eye are being pushed up because the mouth is pushing up, and there was even the side of the nose was pushing up because all of these primary and secondary elements are interacting, and there's some squash and stretch happening because of that interaction. And then I start making my way into more like open mouth expressions because I want to push the expression even more. And I've learned to not shy away from drawing the teeth and adding a little bit of detail there because teeth, tongue, all of that can add a lot of interest and character to your drawing. And you'll also notice that because the mouth is open, I nudged the jaw and chin down. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a chin. And I just did that by using the lasso tool, grabbing my line art and nudging it down. Super easy but effective. I say if you have the tools, use them. I just encourage you guys to give this a try. Try drawing a character and then go through this exercise and just keep changing the expression, push it further. If you ever need like reference, don't be afraid to look it up. Find someone who's making that expression it can really help you out. When I first started drawing mouths open or tongues sticking out, I didn't know how to draw that. So what did I do? I had to look it up and see what it looks like. There's no shame in looking up reference. That's how you build your mental library. You'll notice here that I played a little bit with the pupil size because we talked about how the smaller pupil size can indicate or feels different. Now the expression is completely changing. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, there's so much to say on this, and I feel like this tutorial is already way too long. But I really appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Thank you again, patrons who made this tutorial possible, and you guys are the ones who voted to have this be our first tutorial. So I really appreciate you guys, and thank you so much. If you found this tutorial helpful and you find you're making some awesome expressive characters, I would love it if you would spread the word and maybe tag me so I can see your awesome artwork. And I will maybe talk to you guys later. Bye!